I'd like to call to order Londonderry Budget Committee meeting. Today is May 27th, 2001 at 7 p.m. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Steve, can you please lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to remain standing for a moment, just as a moment of silence to remember all those who have lost loved ones this past year. Thank you. Please be seated. All right. I received some pretty sad news last night. I did share with the chairman of the school board as well as the town council. And I have pushed out an email to my colleagues. Christine Patton has submitted a resignation and asked that I read the following into the record. My husband was diagnosed with stage 3 pancreatic cancer in November 2020. He has gone through chemo and finished radiation earlier this month. Regardless, his health continues to decline to the point of needing assistance on basic needs. I need to focus on him in whatever time we have left. I've enjoyed my term as on the budget committee, doing the best I can to keep our taxes down and hope to be back someday. My last request is that you all send your good thoughts our way. Thank you, Christine Patton, 145 Mammoth Road, Londonderry. And I just want to say that you will definitely be deeply missed. Our thoughts, our prayers are most definitely with you. I did submit this, as I mentioned, to the chairman of the council for their next action, and it's never easy. And definitely, Christine, anything you need at any time, feel free to reach out, and we'll be here. You be missed. So moving on, public comment. So one thing I want to talk about is that public comment. You each have 5 minutes to talk. We will have two, as traditionally as we've done. We have two public comments, one at the beginning of the meeting, one at the end. I have invited the finance directors here to give us a brief on the overall budget process, give us an update on quarter 3, and as well as kind of talk about some questions that might have come up last meeting. So one thing that I ask, my original intent was to have public comment and then have the presenters and then have a second comment. I did receive an email from Mr. Curro, requested that there be some dialogue, if any, from the residents that are in attendance. I would like to keep good order and discipline through this process, so I ask that, one, we adhere to the 5 minutes, and also any budget committee members, we speak with some brevity, and it's super important to maintain decorum throughout this. So public comment, if anybody would like to come up, I ask that you state your name and address for the record.
I just have a quick, are you going to have public comment at the end?
Yes, ma'am. I just want to say that I tend to go over time, so.
What are you trying to tell me? Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and other Budget Committee members. I am Bob Slater, 1 Stonehenge Road, School Board member. I'm here on behalf of myself as a school board member. I am also the liaison for the Budget Committee, and I'm the liaison for a position we created a year ago for district office. And I attend monthly meetings with Mr. Curro, Ms. McKinney, and their staff to get updates for our school board. What's transpired through the month, what's coming up for the following month. So we created that position a year ago. It's worked out really well for the board to be up to date on all the happenings around the school. So the last meeting I noticed or witnessed that a lot of questions were directed to you folks regarding school questions. What I am asking, and I know it was stated from the chairman at one point of the meeting that, have you been to the school board before coming to us? So what I'm here for, and I stated the same thing I'm going to say tonight at the last board meeting, is we want community members to come to us with questions. We want to get you the right information on the street. We don't want assumptions, because assumptions blow up into false narratives that we now have to address in a different way. So please, any community members out there, anyone that wants any question, please come to the school board. If you don't want to attend the meeting, address the school board in an email with a question, and we'll get it answered for you live at our school board meeting. This board has worked diligently over the last couple of years to be as transparent as possible to get the information out to the community members. We have the largest budget in the community. We're looking at ways day in and day out to work on the budget, to stabilize it, to look at ways of cost savings, and it's a constant battle. We know things have changed. Enrollment's down. We're looking at other ways of bringing in revenue. We're looking at cost savings in other areas, and it's just not. It just doesn't happen during budget season. We talk about it at every meeting, and I'm really involved, in a monthly matter with all department heads, and it's great information for the public. So all I'm asking is, if somebody has a question for the school board or needs information, to come to our meeting or reach out to any school board member.org. It'll come to all of us. We'll get the question answered. Go to Mr. Curo and his staff, email their staff. And if anyone is denied any information, they are to contact the school board. I've been involved for a year and a half now as a board member, 4.5 years involved with the school district, and I don't know that any time that information has not been forthgiven to anyone that's asked for it. So if that is a problem, we want to hear about it as a school board, and we want to make sure there is no private information. Salaries are public. The only thing that's private is something in HR, discipline factor, student discipline factor. Those are the only private things. Financials, anything to do financially in that is public documents throughout the whole district as well as with the town. So I just wanted to come as one school board member, and please, if people come to you, I want them to come to you after us, and if they think you can do more come budget season, or ask us questions, or ask us in like you are with Mr. Curo and his staff and Justin, and get more information because a citizen has brought something to you, by all means. It's not restricting. I just want the right information to be brought to you, is all I'm asking. So I'm just wanted to come and address that and ask that any community member come to us first, get the facts, district office, and then by all means come to you guys, share the information. If they don't agree, then you guys do your due diligence as the budget committee for the town and for the taxpayers, and then you can address it with us, and we will try to get you even more information. Or once we get into budget season, that's when we really get into the nuts and bolts of where our finances are and where we're headed for the next fiscal year. So I just want to address that. Any information, we have it, we'll get it, and then we'll move on from there. So thank you for your time, and thank you for all you do for this community. Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Slater, I
Yep.
just have one or a couple questions. So rhetorical question, does the school board have an opportunity where public can comment during your meeting?
Yes, we do. And typically, even our chairman, I'll applaud our chairman, because if we're having deliberation, he'll usually invite someone. If there's been, some deliberation on an area that somebody wants to speak, he will usually entertain that too. So that wasn't done in the past either, but it is now. We want the input. We don't want somebody to go home with 10, 12 15 questions or even one question. If there is a question we can answer it that night, that's when we want to do it. But there's public comment at the beginning of every meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Curl?
I'll use, want me to go first?
No, go ahead.
I'll use part of this under public comment. People, I think the flame throwing and the bombs have got to stop. It doesn't do any good. Okay, and I'm going to address some misinformation comments that we had at the last budget meeting. I'm the only one that can say I've worked for the town for 10 years and I've worked for the school for 10 years, so I know how both work. We know, the three of us, I'll put Bob in as a school, four of us, we know that government is different than how you all and the people work. We know it is. We know that it's different. And we're always willing to provide the information and help you understand, if you are willing to understand why something is done. If you've got a question with the school, 432-6920. You'll get the receptionist and she'll find somebody somewhere to answer your question or bring you in for a visit. If you want help at the town, 432-1100. But the throwing and the assumptions, and I heard, somebody told me, doesn't work. A friend of mine, I'll keep the name quiet, worked at a town in London, worked at a town in New Hampshire. And I asked him, how's it going? And he said, you're not going to believe this. They come in, they ask me how I'm doing, can I help you? And they're pleasant. It's like they want to help me do my job, because when I do my job well, it helps them, the community. That's where we got to get back to, somehow. Most of us are taxpayers. Regardless if we're taxpayers or not, we're here, we're hired to do a good job. And I'm going to tell you, I've been here 30 years. You got a quality staff at the school and a quality group at the town. I would put both of them up against most New England, and they're going to be hard to beat. They do stellar work. Use them. You challenge them all you want. We'd love to be challenged. But at the end of the day, we may not give you the answer you want. It'll be the correct answer. But it may not be what you're looking for, because we don't have agendas. So, as Bob said, if you got a question with the school, call the SAU office. You got a question with the town, call the town hall. They'll help you. But the bombs are not helping.
Thank you.
Yeah, Bob, I'm just thinking about the approach when you say people to come to the school board and ask the question. Sometimes the residents might not have all the information, obviously, and they might want to come to us first and talk to us and say, hey, I'm hearing about the situation. Maybe you can discuss that with the school board, because we've been around the school board a little more than others, right? So we spent more time on the budgets. We understand the budget a little better than most residents. So I'm not sure if that's the right approach, is to ask them to go to you first, when coming to us sometimes gives us a different angle to look at things.
I think,
And I would-
I think real quick, excuse me.
Oh, just one more point. I mean, we've got 25 slides on the topic we spoke about in our last meeting. That's what I mean. One simple topic can lead to 25 slides we're going to talk about tonight.
I think kind of if I have a problem, say with my neighbor, I'm not going to go to my other neighbor to bring up initially talk with my next door neighbor that I have an issue. I'm going to go to that neighbor first and try to resolve it between us. If that doesn't work, then bring someone else. And I think that would be the most healthy way to approach and give, the appropriate level the opportunity to answer.
Yeah, but here you have 6 6 budget committee members that can talk to the school. So someone approaches us and says, here's the situation I'm concerned about. Now 6 of us are going to come back to that and think about it and say, okay, what's going on here?
Yeah, I don't have a
one person.
problem. I'll tell upright. I don't have a problem. I'm going to use Deb, because I saw her walk in and we know each other. If she comes to you and asks you a question, I have no problem in saying, Deb, I don't know the answer. I will get a hold of Mr. Curro, and either he'll call you or I'm going to call you in a day or two. I have no problem with that. But don't guess.
Right.
Because we're going to get into a couple when he sits down and we start. when the last board budget meeting, you guys guessed wrong. We gotta correct a few things.
And I don't want to get too far off subjects. I appreciate, Mr. Slater, you coming in, and Peter and Steve for your comments. And, you know, I personally, I think that, you know, if at least attempt to bring it up to school. And this is no policy. I will never, if someone wants to talk about budget stuff and has a budget question, wants to come to the budget committee and talk, it is absolutely their right. Like I said, we have two opportunities that the public can comment at each meeting. Everyone will have 5 minutes to talk. I would suggest to go to the appropriate person or the appropriate board to resolve or answer any questions I might have, or whatever department first. And if you don't, but, you know, like I said, I will never mute anyone if they have a question and stuff. And I definitely thank you very much for coming in.
No, I just wanted to Steve's point is, when I heard some of the numbers or this or that, it just starts an avalanche of this when the facts aren't correct. That's all I'm asking, is if there's a number and is this how they do this or this, is just ask those, they can call a board member at home if they don't know. They can call Mr. Carroll and get that answer and then bring it to you and say, I don't agree with this, could you look into it? But just don't throw it out there.
As
that-
fact.
As a fact that I heard this and I heard this, and you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's not, you know, fact-driven. So that's all I'm asking, is anybody has a number issue, and then they want to bring it to you, I want them to bring it to you. Is there a way we can change this? That's what you guys do.
And
I
one thing-
applaud that.
And one thing that I have, you know, and that we've talked about as a committee the last time is we each have our own liaisons to our, you know, individual departments, stuff like that, and to make it, you know, so that there's not 7 different individuals going to Peter asking the same question, making sure that, you know, when there is an opportunity, when that comes up, that we do go through the liaison, you know, obviously through the chair, and stuff, like if it's public comment to the school and stuff like that, but through that liaison, just make, you know, to make it more, you know, have that Kaizen approach, so.
We're just really focused to answer the questions that anybody has financially, education-wise. We want to get that community member the correct answers on the street rather than assumptions. That's all I'm saying, is please give us the chance. You can call anyone at home. We're all on there. Our emails are there. We want to help this community. You know, the school, like I said, is the biggest budget in town, and, you know, a lot of us are working hard to try to flatten that curve of the budget and trying to come up with ways. So I just want the facts on the street, that's all.
Right, and you know, if you might have, but if, for anyone that might have received an email from me, my signature line says, "Together we're better." And, you know, I truly believe that we can come together as, you know, a team and, you know, keep on moving forward. So thank you, Mr. Slater, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else,
Chair, can I make a statement?
please?
Since Deb is here, and it kind of reflects what Peter was saying too, she asked the question, what happens if we have a open position that doesn't get filled and it sits open? What happens with the budget money and how does it get used and stuff?
I was gonna cover
Mr.
that.
Siekman,
I just wanted to say, I did find an answer out to that, and when I told you that last I was told by it, is not the case.
We'll cover
thank you.
that.
Yep,
I
we'll
just want to
cover
let you know, I'll
that
let you
during
cover that,
Peter's.
but we did get your answer for you. So.
Good evening, miss.
Hello.
Name and address for the record, please.
Christine Perez, 5 Wesley Drive. First, I want to say that I go to the school board before I come to the budget committee. Correct? You do. I do. And I take my questions and comments to them prior to you. So, and the other thing I want to tell you is that I'm not here to make things difficult for you. I have a concern about taxes. I have since 2013. I actually have paperwork here from things that I had gotten from the SAU in 2013 about numbers of kids and full FTEs for teachers. I am concerned as a resident that the numbers are going down, taxes are going up. I've done a lot of research. After I was here the last time, I actually did a right to know To the superintendent, I have to say he was incredible. He was gracious, he was courteous, something that I have not experienced at the SAU office in the past. And he got my answers back to me within the 5 days. Here's a copy of the stuff that I asked for if you're interested at all. My end game is to collaborate with you so that the correct information gets to you through research so that when you receive information, it is the correct information. And I'll give you an example of that. First, I want to say a couple of things. Right now, according to the information from the SAU, we have 1,430 kids at the school. Next year, we will have 1,341. The following year, 1,321. And in 23-24, we will have 1,211. That's 220 students less than we have this year. That's according to numbers that came from the SAU office. Next year, they are bringing in 29 students into the freshman class from Hooksett, okay? 29 students is every student has to take English, and in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade. We presently have now this is information from my right to know that I received from the SAU. When I went to the school board with this, I was told in no uncertain terms that this was not correct information. This was the information that was given to the budget committee for the budget last year, but it wasn't correct information. Now, okay? Well, I didn't ask for incorrect information when I went to the SAU on my right to know. I asked for correct information. But I'm going to go by this because this is what you all received. We have 521 classes being offered at the high school. 14 of those are filled to capacity. 14 are filled to capacity. 14 are filled to capacity. The information about that I asked about how the rationale for the Hooksett kids coming in, this is what I received from the SAU office. You're more than welcome to a copy of this as well. We go on a year-to-year basis. With grade level enrollment listed, there would most likely be no staff reductions, okay? This comes from a forensic accountant. Numbers are numbers, okay? How many kids you have, how many classes you have, how many teachers you have, how much staff you have is based on numbers, okay? This comes from a forensic accountant. It is an entirely different scenario from this, entirely. This gentleman is looking as if you have 20 new kids coming in the freshman year. You have a capacity of, everybody has to, if you have 200 students coming in as freshmen, every freshman has to take English. Your class capacity is 20, but it's 24 at the high school. And you bring in 20 more students, that is another class, okay? Forensic numbers, okay? I have concerns, and I've had concerns for a long time. Our numbers are going down, and they have been going down. And if I'm going to get misinformation, I'm very concerned about the misinformation that I am getting from the SAU. And the numbers come from finance. We offer Latin 1 and Latin 2 at the high school. I took Latin in high school. I took Latin 1. I wanted to be a nurse. I couldn't take it in my next year because there weren't enough students. Presently, we have 10 students in Latin 1 and 11 in Latin 2. Are we being cost effective in what we're offering? I was told, well, we have to offer things in order to be competitive. I went around to 3 other schools at comparative sizes and look what they're offering. Merrimack offers Arabic.
Ms. Perez,
Okay,
thank you very much for
I'll be back
for
at
coming
the
in.
end.
I have one question.
Ms. Carroll.
Yeah,
Has your forensic accountant ever done a high school scheduling?
I
Simple question, yes or no?
know, but I also have every intentions of meeting with the curriculum coordinator. And I also would like to go on record to the to the school board, that doing this in a meeting to try to get someone to stop talking to me is very inappropriate.
I want to address that. It's inappropriate to have two conversations at the meeting.
He came to me, I was.
All right, thank
I
you.
understand.
Thank you.
But my question still stands. Does your forensic accountant ever run a high school schedule?
She answered.
Mr. Curl, she answered that. She said no.
I didn't hear it.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? All right, seeing none, let's move on to old business. Acceptance of April 22nd, 2021. There has been an email. There are 12 pages. Has everyone had an opportunity to review that? Do I have any amendments? All right, do I have a motion to accept the minutes as is?
So moved.
All right, a motion from 10, a second?
Second.
All right, second from Steve. All in favor to accept these minutes as is, say aye. Aye. All oppose? Seeing none, motion passes. Minutes are accepted. New business, town and school district finance brief. So as mentioned during the last meeting, we had invited the two finance directors to come and speak and give an update as to the Q3 Q3 budget, as well as an overview of the budget process and address anything additional that they choose. At this time, I will turn it over to Justin and Peter. Thank you very much both for coming in.
Is your projector working? While your projector's working, let me first talk about some comments that we need to be corrected from your last meeting. I couldn't attend. I did watch the video. So let me go over a couple of things, and we'll touch back on a few of them. First of all, we need to know
I'll move.
that the town and school are not SB2 government organizations. Not SB2 government. We run the SB2 calendar for budget development. Why invent a new calendar, so to speak? But we are not SB2. We are run by municipal and a school district calendar. So you got to be careful when you say, well, we're SB2, and we're not. So we got to correct that one. There is no time limit, and we'll get into it more. There is no time limit for open positions, okay? And you got to remember, we're talking about a position, not a person. The money doesn't go with the person, the money goes with the position. So obviously, a position is open when somebody leaves, however they leave, okay? It stays open and the money stays available until either the elected officials and/or the administration deem that that position and the duties and responsibilities of that position are no longer needed, whatever reason. You brought up, Mr. Chairman, the example that 2 years ago, 3 years ago, in our budget, we removed the IT director's position. We made a statement, we are removing the IT director, and we farmed out pieces of it to experts, consultants, and Brandon has retained this. So the duties of the IT director for the school district went away as a position and were farmed out in different areas. And this happens very infrequently, but it can happen. If, I'll use the police station, for example, is undergoing a comprehensive review, reorganization, and they got 3 chief positions, or 3 deputy chiefs, and they're not sure if they need all 3. So over the course of time, if the one is open and you're going through the budget process, you can put $1 in that open position, and that dollar holds the position. Remember, $1 is considered a budget. So what organizations would do is they would put $1 in the position's held. You go through the whole analysis, and that position isn't needed, so it goes away. Or if it is, then you fund it properly. That's if, to your point, if it's been 1 or 2 years and you're not sure if you need this position, you put $1 in, and then you hold the position. It's not terminated, didn't go away. You figure out if you need it or not, and then you go ahead and fund it. Okay. What else? The one suggestion I have for you, Mr. Chairman, there is an organization called NHMA, New Hampshire Municipal Association. They provide budget workshops during the months of September, October. I believe you're a member still of NHMA? Yes, we are. I'm not telling you what to do, I mean that, but being on the town for 10 and here for 22, I still go to those. She still goes to those, we go to the school side. Because there's always updated stuff. But they will give you a great idea of some of the particulars that you'll hear Justin or the town council or us tell you during the budget process. Like the importance of the purpose, the importance of the warrant, the importance of the words raise and appropriate, what a special article is, why it's special, why it's not special, and all that stuff. Simply, you guys are, really focused on budgeting or whatever. And these workshops will give you some ideas of why it's particular, why Justin or the chairman of the council said you can't do that. For example, you've heard a couple of times to raise and appropriate money to renovate the fire station. And Chad gets up and says, now, fire's fine, I want to do the public works. And you'll have the moderator, you can't do that, you're changing the purpose. These workshops will tell you why that's important. Before we get into it, a couple of things. The purpose of the budget is not to tell you what things cost. You figure out what things cost at the end of the year when we do our financial reports, when the auditors present their findings of the audit, when we do the MS
25.
and those documents done like in July and August, those are the documents that tell you that the actual cost of police was $2 million, the actual cost of high school was whatever. The budget is a financial plan that is presented from the administration to the elected officials, finally to the voters to approve. Remember, the budget ends 18 months after this thing starts. It is a plan that says the council or the school board and the administrations want to do this and have on their docket to do this. And they expect to spend money for snow removal and so forth. And then things happen. Well, not COVID. I mean, that's one in a lifetime, we hope. We're talking like, remember a few years ago, nobody, even Lisa, didn't think we were going to spend $110,000 one year to take snow off the roofs. So things happen, and we'll get into the legal documents of what a line item versus the bottom line and why it's a bottom line. But you got to understand, the purpose of the budget isn't to tell you how much it costs. The purpose of the budget is to tell you that based on what the council or the school board want to do, they believe it's going to cost this amount of money to provide this service at this level, at this quality. And it's up to the council and Justin and the administrations to use that budget for the best purpose of the town and school. Remember, we'll get to it in a minute. The warrant says to raise and appropriate the sum of $81 million. When the town votes that in, the school board has the authority to expend $81 million for the purpose of schools, and same thing with the town, regardless of what revenue you have. That's some of the things that you'll get in HMA, and we'll get to those, but that's what a budget is. The budget is not supposed to tell you how much it costs. The budget's supposed to tell you what you plan to do with the money that you're asking for. That's the purpose of the budget.
I have
All
a
right.
question real quick, Mr. Curl.
Yep.
what are ways that the form of government gives any overages back?
Through the year, right? And we'll get to that.
Let me, I'm sorry, revenue that has not been planned for. Let me, sorry.
Say that again now.
Thank you. Unanticipated revenue. What does the form of government do with any of the extra? I don't want to say extra. I don't.
You mean the surplus at the end of the year?
Thank you.
Okay, that's a little different. The surplus at the end of the year is really same with you guys. It's income minus expense, right? Or we have to say revenue minus expenditures. So the revenue minus expenditures at the end is Y. In our case, we'll tell you in about a half an hour or 45 minutes. We expect about $1.1 million this coming year. So that goes into what we call fund balance, okay? From there, we provide to the school board our recommendation of what should be done with the accumulated fund balance, okay? So much needs to be retained, so much needs to be retained for risk, so much needs to be retained for rating agencies, and then whatever balance goes back to the taxpayers as revenue to reduce the taxes. Does that help you?
Thank you.
The town has a little bit more importance because they also have to use fund balance for cash flow. And there were communications every other day between the three of us, not knowing what COVID was going to do and so forth and so on, and cash flow to the town and so forth and so on. So they need fund balance and need to manage their fund balance a little bit stronger than we do. Both have fund balance.
Thank you.
Can I just make one point?
I just asked that all questions please be directed to the chair. Yes, just, thank you.
I think everyone here knows what a budget is. I just want to get that straight. Everyone knows what a budget is. I think what happens is that when you said it, a budget is a plan, but also a budget is an allowance,
Yes.
right? It's an allowance. It says you can spend up to this much money. So I think that's what the residents are getting at, is saying, or the people here are saying, well, we don't agree with that budget, or we think there are adjustments that need to be made to that budget. That's what it comes down to. So I'm just saying,
That's
we know
fine.
what a budget is. We know that's not the true expenses, but the goal is, let's look at that budget. Can we squeeze it a little more? That's all.
That's fine. What I heard the last meeting was a person at your public comment was intertwining the cost of running the cost and the budget. That's why I made that distinction.
Thank you.
Okay.
I just gotta grab something.
When are you going to have questions from the community?
One moment, I just gotta grab my tablet, sorry.
Okay. So we now move on to,
Real quick, I just want to answer Ms. Perez's
Oh.
question. I would like to have the presenters present. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I know Ms. Curl had said that, there'll be conversation. I'd like to save that for the second part of public comment. Thank you.
Just, I think as Peter goes through the slides, we're gonna have some questions. I mean, it's probably most appropriate to address those questions as we go through some of those slides. I hate to go, there are 25 slides he's going to go through. Can you stop
Yeah.
at a certain point and say, any questions you have at this point?
yes.
Okay.
I'm fine with that.
Stop me
It's-
if I'm going too long.
I'm fine with that as long as we stay on subject. We talk about budget stuff. We maintain decorum and all. You wait till you're acknowledged from the chairman.
Before we get on, there was one more piece that I need to clarify from your last meeting. One of the people at your public comment, I believe it was Councilwoman Deb Paul, talked about, when she got up the second time, people keep asking her, when did we get the new concession stand and press box and something about field lights? And she went on to say, I was told it came out of, year-end money. They have extra money to spend, that's where it came out of. At some point, I would like Councilwoman Deb Paul to tell me who gave her that information. I hope it didn't come from a school board or a school district employee. Because it can't be any, the correct answer can't be any more wrong. So let me tell you about the press box, concession stand, and the field lights, and this got to us. The press box and concession stand were funded through the 2014 maintenance bond. Remember the maintenance bond, about $4.0 million. Of the 4.0, say 3 million was roofing and paving. These were two projects in the maintenance bond, not come from leftover money at the end of the year. The lights, and Deb, if I'm wrong, yell at me. The lights, I'm guessing what you were talking about is the lights on the lacrosse soccer field, which would be right up against the building. If I'm wrong, just say, no, give me a different field. Those field lights were funded through maintenance trust. Again, not through unexpended money, and we didn't want to turn it back to the voters, is the tone that came out of that discussion. So when we tell you that some of the information can be hurtful and really damaging, this is an example of one of them. So,
Mr. Chairman, I have something else
Sorry.
to add to that discussion.
Yes, Mr. Farrell?
So John Farrell, Chairman of the Town Council. I was involved in the conversation with regards to the press box in 2014 because the building department was about to condemn it. So that's why it was handled under, I would understand why he handled it under maintenance, because it was going to be condemned and shut down by the building department because it was unsafe.
Thank you, Mr. Farrell.
all right,
Chair,
Now I
didn't that
can-
include the bleachers? Wasn't that with the bleachers too, on the far
no,
right?
bleachers were different. They were like a lease purchase arrangement.
I
Okay, so
recall
I
that.
believe these are the three topics in totality you want us to do, and I will do the tuition in, Lisa will do the COVID and give me a break, and then her and I will do the budget questions. Justin will come in, I'm trying to give him a break because he's got other things on his mind. When you see the red print up on the screen, that is town stuff that Justin interjected in the first one I gave you. So, okay. Tuition in students mainly from Hooksett. We've gone through this story a couple times. I am hoping this is the last one we do. So the history of this is, somewhere around 2010, it was clear to anybody that was in public education that the state was looking to pull back on support of public education any way it could. Okay? Starting with, example, they pulled back on supplementing the retirement costs for teachers, and the same thing for police and fire. Okay? They have tried numerous times to tinker with the adequacy grant. At one point, they tried to pull back what's called the stabilization grant. I'm not going to get into what that is, but it would have been about a $2 million loss to us. Fortunately, they didn't, because towns like Franklin, Claremont, the Fab Five, really, that started the whole thing, lost more money than Londonderry. So that put a stop to that. And you remember Londonderry's did the whole Londonderry Cares, or whatever it's called, the coalition, when we gathered money from other districts to argue it was a House bill, something or other. So, and then the last 10 years, I won't give the numbers, we've done it during budget discussion. Adequacy every year gets chopped a buck, so to speak, off of us. Some of it is declining enrollment, freely admit it. Others, it's just trying to trim away the state's funding of education. So seeing that I'm writing on the wall, and we're not the only ones, as there's really three things you can do, either as a government or a private corporation. Accept it, And by accepting it, we would just go along and do what we do, and the tax rate would go up, whatever it is. Recognizing that in the school district, we are very tough on pulling back on programs, opportunities for any student that's enrolled in the school district. Okay? Or you could cut the programs, which I just said we really were not looking to do. And the third option is to find additional revenue. I think Bob Slater is a perfect example. If he's got costs that are fixed costs in this case that are chewing his bottom line, he's going to go find more revenue, more customers. So along the same time comes Hooksett pulling out of the city of Manchester, who they sent their kids to, probably since Hooksett was incorporated way back when. Remember, Bedford sent their kids to Manchester, Hooksett sent their kids to Manchester, and remember, Londonderry didn't go to Manchester, we went to PA, and all that. So Hooksett puts out this like committee for options, ideas, what to do with their high school kids as they're pulling out of Manchester. And so, as Ms. Perez said, they come up with, Pinkerton is the, and we'll get to it in a little while, Pinkerton becomes what's called the School of Record in Manchester because of legacy. We submitted a proposal. We made a business decision to aggressively go after students from outside the school district, and Hooksett was a prime example looking for some ideas. And there's where we went after Hooksett, to bring in additional students to fill the empty seats at the high school. And the purpose of all that was to keep the programs and the options available and reduce the bottom line to the local taxpayer also. That's why we pursued the idea of tuition and students, and that's why we went to Hooksett, because timing is everything. They were in a position where they were pulling out of Manchester. Same thing with Deerfield. They've got a committee looking for what is the best place, what are the best options for their kids. Okay? So we talked about the legislature. Londonderry has open classroom seats at the high school. Okay? Their costs are fixed. Okay? The teachers, the HVAC, the building, the custodians, the salt, the sand, the snow removal, almost the whole area is fixed. Okay? When you have that much fixed costs, as I said, you look for additional revenue. The high school has excess students. Excess seats. Excess capacity. Okay? So the question is, what do we want to do? So it's really this simple for us, and we'll get into it a little more. You ready? Okay. Here. I got 21 seats in this classroom. I got 20 kids filling this classroom. What do you want me to do with this seat? I can just put it in the custodian closet, let it sit there empty, or I can sell this chair for $12,000 as the current tuition to Hooksett, times 117. If I don't sell it, nothing happens. Fixed costs are still the same. Teacher's still there. Classroom's still being heated. I can sell this for $12,000. We made a business decision. We were aggressive, and we'll get into the pricing in a second. As I mentioned, Pinkerton is the School of Record in Manchester, and the rest of the ones are MOUs. Bow, Pembroke, Goffstown. Okay? Pinkerton's rate is $13,698. Remember, Pinkerton is the School of Record. They must take any student from Hooksett who wants to go to PA. Period. End of discussion. Pinkerton and talking to them, has already invested money in infrastructure, in staffing, to take any and all kids that Hooksett sends. In fact, talking to the BA in Hooksett, when you're in 8th grade, you automatically get enrolled to PA at Hooksett. When you rolled it, the kids up into high school, they're all in Pinkerton. And you've got to call the SAU and say, like my kid to go to Bow, like my kid to go to Londonderry, or whatever. And then they're pulled out. I don't know the process, if you have to write a letter, or whatever. Okay? Londonderry has 117 kids, right? Bow, Pembroke, Goffstown, all have, I think the highest is 7. Well, I think Pembroke has 21. We have 117. Okay? Remember, we don't have to take any student any year, okay, as opposed to Pinkerton. Back to what Mrs. Perez was saying a little earlier ago, one of the things you must understand, you have to understand, the scheduling at the high school is very complex. In fact, I'll tell you, when you plan a high school, 80% capacity is considered full. 80% is considered full because of scheduling, because of the scheduling changes that need to go on. You have to keep in mind, kids need certain grade classes to graduate. They need certain classes to go to the elites. They need certain classes to do what they want to do. They need certain classes at certain times because, in my kids, for example, they wanted the last class off because they had athletics. Mrs. McKinney's kids, let's say, didn't have athletics, and they wanted the first period off. They run hundreds of scheduling nightmares to get everybody in. And to run a complex and a comprehensive high school isn't cheap. It is expensive. It is the way your kids get into the elites. There are certain programs that you carry. And keep in mind, when you're in the elementary, and Mrs. McKinney, and she's a 3rd grade teacher, she's only teaching 3rd grade. She got 24 kids or whatever. Mr. France at the high school has got English 101, Advanced Lit, and whatever else all over the place. It's not as simple as enrollment in the elementaries. There are much more variables that go into the scheduling of a high school. We made a business decision, as I mentioned, to go after them, and we did. Okay? We got all this. Mrs. Perez brought up at your last meeting the average cost of a high school kid in Londonderry in 1920 is $16,441. $941. Do you want to see the sheet that the high school, that the state works, or are we good? I have it. We're good? Okay. This is not what Londonderry taxpayers pay. Okay, that is the total cost of the high school. That takes into account all the staff, HVAC, whatever, including, if you remember Article 3. Article 3 says to raise and appropriate $3 million or whatever for dining services and special education needs with a 0 tax impact, right? Because we get the money from IDA. Well, any of those teachers that are funded by IDEA or other special revenue grants are in the $16,941. So she's correct. That is the total cost for an average, that's the average cost for a high school student at Londonderry. That is not what you pay as a Londonderry resident through your local property taxes. Okay? Here is the tax rate. Remember this? The tax rate sheet? There is your gross budget, right? $81,500,000. Let's keep it simple. That is the total amount of cost to run the school district that was approved by the voters. $60,500,000 is the net assessment that is used to calculate the tax rate for Londonderry residents. Remember, we forgot this, I guess. There's $22 million of subsidized revenue. Most of it comes from the state, inadequacy and whatever. Look right here, is your 16,000 from, not all Hooksett, but 1.4 is from Hooksett. Your average cost for a Londonderry taxpayer through property taxes, when we calculated, was about $11,200. That's what you pay through your local property taxes on, for actually this year, so it wasn't even you were doing this. So, while we're here, hold on, I gotta get there. Your tax rate, right, was $12.95. Sorry, but I'm just gonna remove this whole thing. I know it's not quite the whole, right, can you just bear with me a little bit here? $12.95 to $13.29 if we got rid of the whole Hooksett tuition in program. Is that what we want? You didn't gain anything. You didn't get anything except you lost $1 million. Actually, when we did it, it's like $13.25. That's why we're adamant for this program. We think it's a win-win for the Hooksett kids that want to come here. It's a win-win for the property taxes because you get 40 cents off your tax rate by us aggressively doing this. Okay? You got to understand what costs are, and I know he's in numbers, and I know Jen's in numbers. The marginal cost that we calculated, including transportation, that I'm going to get to in a minute, is just over $1,000 for a tuitioned-in kid to come in. And we charge them $12,000. So we net $11,000 per kid. I went too fast. $11,000 per kid. So Mrs. Perez brought up a little while in your meeting. In the MOU, it says we take in 40, right? And 1 year we took in 51. If there's capacity, and I don't need to hire any staff, and I have room, and I can bring in 11,000 net times 10 to the taxpayer, is that a good business decision? Because I think so. I don't think I needed the MBA for that. That's what we did. The first few years, back to transportation, we did charge. We charged $90 a month for transportation. We got calls on calls on calls about what can you do about transportation from the parents. Remember, Hooksett School District sets the rate for the MOU districts. They're the buyer. They set the price. We don't have to do it. If Hooksett sets the price in June for $10, I'm being really stupid now, but Londonderry could say, not taking any of that price. Sorry, that's too low for us. Pinkerton's gonna take them all. So they set the rate in June. We decide if we're comfortable, we can accept that number or go higher or not. But we got calls after calls after calls about the cost of transportation. So take that bit of information plus the fact that Bo and them charge more than than the Hooks it's going to pay, could that be one of the reasons why we have 120 kids, plus or minus, and Bo and Goffstown and Pembroke have 20 at the most?
Can you switch back to presentation mode, please, on the PowerPoint?
Sorry, I gotta go back and forth. See, now you did it.
Keep going.
We went over the decision for the 51 kids. The cost, just so everybody understands, I can't see your slide, but maybe I'm looking at an angle. Just so we're clear. Just so we're clear, the cost for the bus, is $200 per student. There you go. I can see that.
Better?
I can see that. I can. Okay? The cost for the bus is $200. You're paying for fuel and labor only to Hooksett. I need that bus to do middle school and elementary runs. So the capital costs and the terminal costs are already in the contract. $200. $200 plus $800 gets me $1,000, and for every kid that comes, I'm netting $11,000. Is that the last financial one? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's the financial picture, the history, and why we believe that this program not only benefits Londonderry kids, benefits Londonderry taxpayers, and I think you asked the question, that's how it was back then, is it still relevant?
Right.
I would answer, the answer is still, it is still relevant. At some point, if enrollment turns around and we start running out of seats, we start pulling back on the number of students from Hooksett or Deerfield or anywhere else. But my finance people, you never want assets idle. You always want your assets working. You acquire assets to make money. We've got a high school with seats, and the seats are not making any money for us. As I said earlier, I can sell that seat for $12,000 per kid.
Chair, can I ask a statement for clarification? Since we have Peter here to clarify something that was made by a member of the public. An example was, you got 112 those students in from whoever town it was. Since they are all freshmen, must take a certain class, if we got rid of 50 of them, we wouldn't need those 2 extra English Comp 1 classes or whatever it is that says they have to take. And one of the things that she says she had spoke to the planners of that, and one of the things I asked this years ago, I remember when we talked about this, was, correct me if it's still the same way or if I'm wrong with it. The planners know that they wouldn't hire another teacher to teach that extra class or 2. They have English teachers, and instead of certain English teacher teaching 4 classes, this English teacher may pick up 2 because they need 6. So it wouldn't affect hiring or another teacher or losing a teacher. They'd redistribute in those levels, give that, like that teacher is doing Comp 1, and then Comp 2. They shift what the responsibilities of an existing teacher is to make up for those classes. They wouldn't hire a new teacher. Or is
Depends on how bad it gets, right?
Right.
But I can tell you tonight, we have not hired any teachers to accommodate the Hooksett population. And if the Hooksett population were to go this year, all 117, go to Pinkerton, it is highly unlikely, never say never, because you don't know, but highly unlikely that we would reduce the staffing at the high school at all. This is pure money coming in. So that's I do have one more slide I want to address, but this covers for lack of better words, the financial picture of why we believe this is a still relevant and program for the Londonderry School District and taxpayers.
You have one more slide, you said?
Yeah, I want to finish the financial
All right, go ahead.
piece. We good?
Oh, we have one more slide?
Yes.
Right?
So I one,
Yeah.
do
But I-
one slide,
but I
and
didn't
then
want
we
to-
had a question.
Question at the end came about students from Hooksett taking away achievements or whatever from Londonderry students. I think the chairman's here, Mr. Slater's here, and I rarely speak for them, but I think I can do this time. Every student in Londonderry will be treated without discrimination. When you enroll in the Londonderry School District, you are a student of the Londonderry School District. When you walk through the front door of the high school, you are part of Lancer Nation. And you will receive any award or whatever starting position or whatever that you have excelled and achieved and worked hard and dreamed in the goal that you set. When you're a Londonderry student, you are part of Lancer Nation. That's the Hooksett program in a nutshell from us.
Thank you. This time, I noticed there's some hands or whatever. Ms. Perez, I saw yours first. Would you like to come up, state your name and address for the record, please?
Christine Perez, 5 Wesley Drive. I want to address the first comment that he made about talking about the difference between the school and the town and all of that. One of the things that you said that, comparing the school budget to the town budget, and you used the police department as an example. The difference that I see between the police department and the school is that the school is a fluid budget, much more fluid than the police. For example, if I have 10 police officers for the town of Londonderry, okay, and I cut off a third of the town and sell it somewhere else, I may not need those 10 police officers because I have a third less land and houses and people to police. So that's my first comment. I don't think that was a very good. The other comment I'd like to make is you said your kid went and wanted first period off because of this, and my kid wanted second period off, last period off because of this. We're talking about want and need here. There's a big difference between want and need, okay? The other thing is, if this is such a tremendous financial thing for us, why isn't Bow, Goffstown, Pembroke doing the same thing? Bow charges $15,968 for the kids from Hooksett. Goffstown charges $14,500, and Pembroke charges $13,165. And yes, they have empty seats too. I called, I asked, I spoke to the high school. Why, if this is such a financial good thing, are we not seeing it? And why aren't other people doing this? The other thing is we are a public school. We are not a private school. We are not tuitioning kids I sent my kids to Bishop Girton as opposed to Hollis High School. I tuitioned them in. Yes, we're not a private school. You cannot compare us to Pinkerton. Pinkerton is a private school. And I have from 2013 information that I got from the SAU office that talked about the decrease in students from 2008 to 2012, 647 students less. One teacher for every 17 students was FTE was gotten rid of. One teacher for every 17 students dropped in enrollment. So if we're dropping hundreds of kids, or if we got rid of 117, why are we not doing the same thing that was done in 2013?
I answered that.
Well, I'm not asking for your answer, I'm making a comment. And also, the other thing is, you can say that it only cost $11,000 to educate. If I take your 81,500,000 budget, and I divide it by the number of kids you have, we're paying over $20 per, 20, instead of $20,000. $20,000 per student, not $16,488. You can say whatever you want with juggling, but it's amazing to me that you are so much smarter than everybody else in the state of New Hampshire.
Thank you. Any other, anyone else wants to talk about Hooksett? I saw it real quick. Yeah, his hand up next. And we'll
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tony DeFrancesco, 1 Cheshire Court. Several things. One, just to put things in perspective, when I wore a younger man's clothes and my hair was a different color, I had an opportunity at the high school on several occasions to work a schedule. That time I was obviously much younger, but at the time and to this day, I've never seen anything as complicated as that. And I will tell you that you cannot do simple math. You can't do some basic principles. Math doesn't always work forward and backwards when you're doing a high school schedule. You cannot assume that all 50 kids coming from somewhere are going to be in the same classroom or the same 2 classrooms at the same time of day at the same place, because you have a lot of things that you have to deal with. Number 2, I take offense at the statistics that were given at the beginning of the meeting by a member of the community that said that in 2022, the high school enrollment or the school district enrollment, whatever it was said, is going to be this amount of children. I'm not sure how smart anybody is, but I'm pretty convinced nobody can tell me exactly what the enrollment is going to be in 2022. Thirdly, I will tell you that there are a lot of people in Londonderry that are very satisfied with the level of service that's being delivered by the school district in Londonderry. I will tell you in 2020, over 300 single-family homes transferred, and I will tell you quite a few of those came because of the school district. So you all know that the school district is the economic driver of a town. You all know that if the school district fails, Londonderry turns into some of the other towns in the state that you don't want to be. So you all don't need to get into the philosophy. You all don't need to get into the curriculum. You all need to make decisions based on what you discover in your meetings, in the thousands of hours that you take as volunteers every year. And so I hope that you'll continue to do that, and I hope you'll understand that there's another side to this coin, and that there are lots of people in this town that are very satisfied with the level of service as it sits currently. And you have to wonder about being the smartest people in the state. You have to wonder, why is it that people are clamoring to come to Londonderry? Why are they paying $180,000 more than assessed value? Why are there bidding wars on properties? Part of what I'm saying, part of what I'm seeing is because Londonderry is a great place. Because on the town side, it's run very well. On the school side, that it's done very well. People know what the tax rate is before they come in. And they're coming. So thank you for the time. One question, can I ask Mr. Curro a question, or can I ask it through you?
You ask it through me, please.
Thank you. So there was a number given for Pinkerton students are being charged X number of dollars. First of all, Pinkerton is not a private school, it's semi-public. Semantics. But my question to Mr. Curro would be, in that fee, do they have to take special ed students? And so if they do take special students, the second question would be, does Londonderry accept special education students for the price that we charge? And then what would the delta be between those two? Because I personally know that special ed students cost a lot more to service than what we call a regular ed student. Thank you.
One thing I asked that the sidebar comments in the back, I asked that you keep it to a minimum. If I can hear you up here, you're not giving the same respect as you're given. I just ask that, one, you keep sidebar comments yourself. If you do, feel free to step outside, have a conversation outside. And again, please address the chair during any public comment. Anyone else, sir? I know you had,
Am I supposed to answer his question?
Ms. Curl.
Yes, Pinkerton has to, because they have the school of record, take any and all students that want to go to Pinkerton. Londonderry takes in regular ed students and for the $12,000 at the current rate. And then any students that require additional services would be charged accordingly.
Is there any?
It's hard to say. I will say that the biggest difference, however, is that Pinkerton, being the school of record, must take any and all kids, whether they got room or not. They got to make room. They got to find room. Londonderry can just take 40, 20, 30, whatever number it's comfortable with, whatever number it has room for.
All right.
Just have a transportation.
Kenny.
So Peter, you mentioned in your slide that it costs $200 per student
For the bus.
for the bus. I think that some of the confusion comes from the original MOU that was signed, and I don't know if there was an amendment to it. But it is a legal binding contract, and it does state that the costs do not include transportation for any reason.
Right.
So I think that some residents are confused by that as to why we're still transporting when we shouldn't be, according to this contract.
Well, the contract says that we would not be charging, so any service that we want to do above and beyond that, with Hooks' permission, those was obviously granted. So where that came into was, and I don't know what year it was, so forgive me for the year, that the high school came to us, and they actually had a letter from 10 residents that asked that they would come to Londonderry, they wanted to come to Londonderry, but the transportation cost was a major factor for them, their family financials. So let's do the math. $200 more, and I get 12,000 more, in that case, probably 11,500.
No, I understand the math. It's the principle and the concept of the
Yep.
contract.
It was a business decision to.
Okay, then there should have been an amendment to it.
Maybe.
The legal binding contract.
That contract, I think you brought it up, or somebody brought it up, that expires in '23, so that will probably be, well, a number of things will be adjusted.
Okay.
The chair, I have two questions. Two questions for Peter. So Peter, is there any reason why we can't charge more than 12,000? I mean, the contract says we can.
Yep, there's no reason why we cannot, there is no reason why we can't ask
Okay.
for more than what Hooksett School District is willing to pay.
Okay.
What I gave you was, it is clear to us that once you start charging, because Hooksett will only pay what they vote on, and they vote June, right? Somewhere in the middle of June. So let's just say they say 12,250, just for discussion. That's what the Hooksett School District is going to pay us. So if we charge 13, that means the parents are gonna pay the additional costs. So the evidence to us is, they argued vehemently to the high school, can you do something with the transportation costs? And the fact that we have 117 coming, and Bow and Pembroke will never of 8, 9, 20. So clearly, you can deduct that any cost, any substantial cost out of pocket to the family is a factor to come to Londonderry as opposed to the others. I will tell you, I have a witness, Pinkerton is begging to take all 117 kids from us. They would love to take all the kids that come to Londonderry. So the minute we make it financially tough, how's that, for the parents, they're now gonna decide, are we showing out-of-pocket money to go to Londonderry, or no money, and they're going to PA.
Okay.
So you would agree, it's a game, so to speak.
Correct. I just want to make sure we're maximizing what we can.
Yeah.
If we can, if we're doing that, it's great. Let's go back to your scenario about the empty seat. Let's flip that around. Let's make it a classroom that has 10 students or 11 students, right? Take off one empty seat, and you no longer have to teach that class.
It's to our record.
I'm just,
that
no, no,
is not-
I'm just putting that out there. I'm just saying,
Yep,
it drops down to 10, oh, we don't have to fulfill that class. Now, the situation changes. Now, all of a sudden, you take out the 117, how many does that affect?
and I said earlier, we didn't do right down to nitty gritty. We did it like a 5,000-foot level.
Mm-hmm.
If we took out the 117 kids this year, June 30,
Yep.
all 117 go away. It is highly unlikely that we would make any staffing changes.
That's, my point is, when we say there is no additional cost per student, I find that difficult because there is a cost, a variable cost, when a certain amount of students are needed for a class, and you drop below that amount, you can drop a teacher,
I understand that.
it's now a cost. So that's, so just, I think we just be careful not in saying, just blanket saying,
No,
there's no additional
okay,
cost
let me-
here.
let me
That's why,
clarify.
because there are costs,
In your scenario, there would be.
yes.
What I'm saying to you is, the high school went through and identified where the Hooksett kids are and pulled them out, so to speak, and came to the conclusion that it was highly unlikely if all 117 kids were gone June 30, when we do our budgeting September, October, it is highly unlikely that there would be any staffing changes because of that. Just-
Highly unlikely, that's correct, and that's fine. I guess as long as we're looking at that, and you can present that to the residents and say, here, we
Did
did
I
a due
not ask
diligence.
Jason point blank
Yeah.
that question? Just because I knew it would come up, and it's a valid, it is a valid question. It's easy to say, we have not added any staff for Hooksett. The reverse is, okay, if they're all gone, would you reduce any? What we're told is, because of the complexity, and because there are programs or classes that you want to keep, need to keep, or should keep. That's the strategy, that's the dilemma, that's the issue that the high school deals with. Okay? Let's just use Latin for one example. You really don't want to get rid of Latin until you absolutely positively have to. You will do everything you can. You'll pull, Mr. Kipp will pull you in if we have to get Latin, because you do not want that program. There are certain things that you have to give, right, for graduation requirements, and then there are certain classes you need to get if you want to maintain a comprehensive, elite high school so your kids have a shot at going where they want to go. Once you start dropping some of the advanced and honors or whatever, and your curriculum becomes a little bit less robust or whatever, it's going to be tough for the kids to go where they want to go. That's why I said, and I meant it, it's expensive to maintain a high-level, comprehensive high school.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask Mr. Carro a question? In your business planning, because these are business decisions, and I understand that, what are your minimum and maximum targets for tuition students, primarily Hooksett at this point? How many would be too few for us to take, and how many would be too many in either direction, because that would have budget impacts, whether it's staffing, whether it's some other transportation, some other expense line that's going to be impacted? So minimum and maximum from planning.
That would come from the high school. I don't want to guess, but the high school runs their scheduling, and based on when they run their scheduling, they know or get a feel for how many kids they can bring in without requesting additional staff.
The maximum is 40 as part of the MOU.
Per-
And the minimum is
40 per
one.
level.
Yeah,
We would
40,
take,
right.
we would take one.
Thank you.
And someday, that's going to come. Has to.
Ms. Perez.
So just one question. Earlier on, you mentioned that that you were getting, or the school district was getting calls and complaints from the Hooksett parents from the $90 a month for transportation. Was this before the agreement was made? Did they stop making payments after?
No, it was after,
Afterwards?
it was in the middle of the agreement. We just made the decision that 10 students at $11,000 per, net was worth the bus. And like I said, part of the decision, I understand where you're coming from, but part of the decision was the bus was already part of our fleet. I mean, the physical bus. The cost was, the decision was, we want to spend the extra money for one driver to leave a little early, because they got to go to Hooksett and come back. So we weren't adding a bus. We were just using one of the buses as a high school bus instead of doing Adams Road and whatever, going to Hooksett and back.
Thank you. Ms. Perez, name and address, please.
According to the SAU, the bus costs over $23,000 a year. That I got from my right to know. Presently, right now, according to the information that was given to me from the SAU, there are 11 ninth grade English classes. Capacity is 24. I'm leaving out the remote ones, but they have one with 12. Let's see, they're 20, 16, 12, 23, 18, 13, 20, 18. Humanities has 33, it can take 35. And then 22 and 21, perhaps we could combine some that you had more classes with 24 students in them and eliminated some of the classes that they had. And as far as the agreement of the year that they took 51 students as opposed to the maximum of the contract, according to Hooksett, it was at the request of Londonderry, not at the request of, at the request of Londonderry, not at the request of Hooksett. And the other MOUs do not provide transportation, and they do charge up to what it is costing them per student. So they'll take the 12,000, but they'll charge 15-something, 14-something, because that's the cost per student. Again, I don't understand why the people in Bedford, Goffstown, and Pembroke are so stupid.
I need to clarify one thing. We have never said our surrounding counterparts are stupid.
Thank you. All right, COVID grants.
All yours.
Okay. COVID grants, all right. This is an update. I've given it to the school board. There's a little bit of new information which we will be presenting to them as well. To date, the Londonderry School District has 4 COVID relief grants. Although these grants provide for COVID relief, they have differences in allowable expenditures and periods of eligibility. The 4 grants that we have been allocated total $3,401,427. I'll discuss each grant and how we have either spent the funds or plan to spend the funds. It's important to note that each of these grants have a specific purpose and can only be used for that purpose. We could not, for example, use these funds as revenue to offset the tax rate. The first one was called the Supplemental Public School Response Fund. We received $971,998. It was designed to provide relief and support for unanticipated costs associated with the safe opening and operation of schools during the pandemic. The period of eligibility was March 1st of 20 through December 30th of 20. We have completely spent all of these funds. I'll give you a brief overview. I don't want to get into too much detail as to where we spent the money. If anybody has any questions and wants more detail, I have it, and I'm happy to share that. We used this grant to fund our summer school program last year. We used it for PPE, cleaning and sanitizing supplies, masks, gloves, shields, to the tune of about $235,000. We used it to buy some air purifiers for the classrooms for about $197,000. We bought some storage rental tents, outdoor tents for lunch. If you remember the high school, when the schools had lunch outside, so we provided tents for that. Sanitizing equipment, $51,000. We had to buy some desks so that we could socially distance the students in the classroom, $7,000. Teaching staff, we had to pay for some additional classes because of remote learning and scheduling. Teachers had to pick up some additional classes. We hired an additional nurse, 0.8 FTE on the nurse to accommodate the higher volume in the nursing department. We paid for custodial contract for extra sanitizing, $41,000 under this grant. Additional costs for providing meals. If you remember last spring, I guess it was, when the pandemic hit, they were delivering meals to homes for students that were home when they were all in remote. That's $29,000. That was for extra packaging, et cetera, under that program. We bought some computers, some interactive touch screens to help with remote learning, $119,000 for that. The computers are $74,000. Video conferencing as well for $24,000, again for the remote learning. And then some curriculum days for staff to develop the online curriculum last summer. So those funds have been spent, and that grant has expired. Now we're moving on to the ESSER grants. We have 3 of those, ESSER 1, 2, and 3. ESSER 1, we received $168,605. This grant was funded by the CARES Act to help K-12 educational entities prevent, prepare for, and respond to the impacts of COVID-19. The period of eligibility was March 13th of 20, and it ends in September of 22. But we will have those funds spent long before that. The idea of this is to spend ESSER 1 before you move on to the others. So we will have those funds probably spent at the end of this fiscal year, if not definitely by the summer. Some of the things we spent with we used ESSER 1 grants for what was, again, the summer school of 2020, $6,000. More PPE, cleaning and sanitizing supplies, $20,000. Again, it's this teaching staff for hybrid learning, $71,000. The nurse, $22,000. The balance of the custodial contract for $48,000. And that should take care of ESSER 1. And again, that's subject to change as things get spent. That we're allowed, they're giving us a lot of flexibility on the spending of those funds. I mean, what we spend the funds on are pretty clear, but moving from one grant to the other, they're being much more flexible than they are with any other grants we receive. ESSER 2 is $696,335. This was funded by the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, CRRSA, to supplement schools to help in the response to COVID-19. It's similar to ESSER 1 with broadened allowable use of funds. The period of eligibility on this was, again, March 13th of 20, and this one goes out to September 30th of 23. So with this grant and ESSER 3, we will be able to provide students probably with summer school, enhanced learning opportunities to bridge the gap of learning gaps that's happened during remote. So these funds will last us for another 2 years. Some of the things we've spent or have budgeted for ESSER 2 is math curriculum, summer curriculum for 21, the summer coming up. Summer Academy, they have some Math Academy, they're calling it, for students that have fallen behind in math. They're offering some programs through the summer to try to catch these students up. Reading tutors, again, some desks, some custodial overtime for the reopening of the high school. We had to, over a weekend, so we've got the word from the state, the week before, and we had very little time to get the schools back up for bringing everybody back from the high school to in-school learning. Again, the nurse will be funded again next year through ESSER 2. And then they have a kindergarten teacher to reduce the class size to allow for social distancing. And we also have some construction projects which we are working with the state on now on getting approval. There's some word that has just come out the last day or two that's making the approval of the construction projects a little bit more difficult, waiting for some guidance on the state. We're hoping that the HVAC projects will go through. We have a roofing project we're not sure about, so we'll let you know as soon as we know about those construction projects and where we'll be spending those funds. But like I said, there's some real tightened up restraints, federal requirements on the construction projects. And then we have ESSER 3, which is, our allocation is $1,564,487. We do not have the full allocation yet. The state just granted us 2/3 of that this past week, and the other third will be allocated when they have to get their reopening plans up to the federal level, and then they'll be able to allow the release of the remainder of those funds to the local schools. So again, that's further out. We're going to use up ESSER 1. Like I said, that should be done this summer. ESSER 2 we'll move into, and then ESSER 3. That'll bring us hopefully for the next 2 or 3 years for some enhanced learning opportunities for the students, and hopefully as well with some of the HVAC and things to improve the air quality in the schools. So again, in total, our total COVID relief and grants was $3,401,427. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody has.
Thank you, and thanks for the detail. I'm curious to know what is going to happen with the additional staff hours, any additional staff you needed to hire when the grant money runs out. That's my first question.
Well, the additional staff was really for remote learning, some teaching, as far as scheduling and trying to get when they were in hybrid, some teachers had to pick up some hybrid classes as well as their classes that they had. So that should all go away. They're all back in, so the additional classes should be done at this point. The staffing will simply be for learning academies, the summer academy, tutors, that sort of thing.
So if we've started any new programs as a result of this money, and the money goes away at whichever time frame it is, what will happen to those programs that our students may have come to rely on and
Well, I
enjoy?
think then the district would need to make a decision, but we haven't started new programs other than the summer academy programs.
Okay.
So like I said, ESSER 3 will go through 2024, so I would hope by that time that we've had the opportunity to catch all of our students up to the level that we would expect them to be at.
Another, Mr. Chairman? This is a detailed question. Tell me how the roof repair fits under a COVID relief.
Okay, that was the HVAC. I'm gonna, construction's not my thing, so I'll do the best I can. The AC units sit on the roof, so the part of the roof that they were gonna have to repair to get that HVAC unit on the roof was somehow gonna be allowed to be expended as a construction cost.
Roofing, if a roof leaks lead to mold lead to poor air quality.
Right.
You asked the question, I'm not saying we all agree with it.
Not doubting that it does, I'm just,
That's,
COVID money.
that's their way of roofing is when it leaks, you have mold, and you have other contaminants that lead to poor air quality. And one of the things they're trying to address is air quality. So anything like the HVAC or the roof that adds to poor air quality, they want to address.
And I will tell you some of the problems that we just have encountered just yesterday, to be honest, and I'll just fill you in. We haven't filled our board in yet, so you'll be hearing this next week, Bob. The construction projects they're getting very particular with the guidelines from the feds. So the guidelines say that you need prior approval to contracting or even bidding out these projects. The problem with that is school districts all across the state have bid out these projects already and have them lined up to do the work here this summer. So now they tell us yesterday or day before, I think it was yesterday actually, that we needed prior approval from the state, and the state needs to get approval. Then you need to get drawings to the state, approval, then you can go out to bid. Well, that's not going to happen when everybody has everybody scheduled in for this summer. So we're working through that.
However-
We don't know where it's going to land, but
However, the state doesn't have anybody to approve the plans yet.
right. So
Understood, thank you.
stay tuned. We don't really know.
Thank you. Anyone else?
The only one piece I'll add is, because we'll get to it in a minute, we do third quarter, COVID money cannot be used to address lost revenue programs. So you talked about the lost revenue from dining services, which we're going to pick up. The town was looking at lost revenue in a variety, which was, add to their cash flow needs or whatever. So, if you have dining or motor vehicle permits or whatever, COVID was not being allowed to recover those needs.
Thank you. Town grant.
So I started with the COVID, and we obviously started with the GOFR, the Governor's Office for Emergency Relief and Recovery. This one was the bigger one that was about $614,000. We used this to essentially outfit the town hall, senior center, library, everywhere that the public goes with all the plexiglass and things of that nature, with the sanitizers, as well as all safety mask protocols. In addition to that, we were able to buy some filters. This grant constantly was changing as guidance kept adjusting almost on a monthly basis. We filed the reimbursements on a 2-month basis, essentially, for what we were doing and what we were receiving. We also were able to use this for the technology remote working to allow us to still be able to function as essentially the remote town hall, where I'm sure people remember we were shut, but still registering vehicles and doing all the stuff that we would normally do, where Public Works was still going and doing what they do, building was doing what they were doing. The next one is the New Hampshire First Responder Hazard Pay. This is the one that the governor decided to hand out to the fire department and the police department, all those employees. That had to be funneled through us, and we had to disperse the funds to the individuals that qualified for that grant as a first responder. The GOFR funds allowed us to cover the taxes and other additional benefits that the hazard pay came along with. When the hazard pay was issued, it didn't include things like Medicare, the retirement. GOFR allowed us to cover those costs with that funding as well. The next two I'm going to kind of do together because they are similar. One, the Secretary of State came from the state of New Hampshire government, also through the CARES Act. The other one, the Center for Tech and Civic Life Election, is exactly as it says. It's an election grant. Both of them were to assist with the necessary precautions for the September and November elections, as well as the large increase in absentee ballots that occurred during that time. The Coronavirus Emergency Supplemental Funds was offered through the Department of Justice. This allowed us to obtain overtime for police and fire from, I believe it was January 20th through, we used May 21st of 2020. We were able to recover the overtime funds that were related to COVID. I can stop there for questions or keep going, and we can just ask questions at the end. It's up to you guys. Keep going? Alrighty. Along with, actually, good thing you said keep going. Along with the overtime, it also covered several of the, not apparatus, equipment that the fire department needed to assist in ensuring they have safe COVID protocols, such as the mats, masks, and other items. The sanitizer, why can't I think of it? The air fogger that cleans the ambulances and things of that nature. The Assistance to Firefighter Grant Supplemental Grant, that's similar to the CESF, but more firefighter-based and focused more on the equipment for the firefighters. The COVID staffing vaccination aid reimbursement. So if you remember Exit 4A, there was the vaccination station where we had our police and fire staffing it. The state of New Hampshire paid us back for that, as well as any of the firefighters that traveled down to Salem or any other location to administer the vaccine. I'm going to skip FEMA right now and go to the Health and Human Service Medicare fee-for-service funding. So at the very start of this, HHS essentially offered municipalities based on their Medicare amount funding. For us, it was about $20,000. And what they essentially did was if you took an ambulance ride, experienced COVID symptoms, we could not charge more than what the insurance company was willing to pay. It ended up working out very well for us, but it was a risk where we could have taken a hit on revenues. The thing is, we spoke about it and we determined that with COVID coming, it wouldn't be fair to individuals that were infected by it to also have to deal with this aspect and the pandemic with the potential of job losses. Going back to FEMA public assistance, this is essentially a catch-all for everything else, mainly focusing on public safety. This is why I said May 21st for the CESF grant, because from May 22nd through today, we'll be requesting our reimbursement for overtime COVID-related expenses through that. Several sanitizing expenses for the police and fire will also be requested through that. The American Rescue Plan Act is the newest one, which has also been fun to deal with. Can you go to the next slide?
Yes, sir.
So it's originally estimated at 2.6 million when they first originally started talking about this. The amount, however, is subject to change because Londonderry qualifies as a non-entitlement community, which is essentially a community with less than 50,000 residents or does not have a community block development grant. Because of that, what the federal government is doing, they're sending their lump sum to the state, and the state will then be dispersing it based on the municipality's budgets, what's available from the state, and the community size. I'm expecting it to still be around there, but it is likely to change. Guidance is still being developed. I found it amusing that they came out recently with the interim final guidance, which interim means it's not final.
Even when it is final, they change it.
Oh, exactly. Like I said, with Gopher, it was constantly evolving. This one, they're at least not evolving. They're just telling us we don't know what you can do with it. There's discussions between other governmental officers. We're not sure if we're allowed to have it in an interest-bearing account at this point. That's how little guidance there is for us. So ineligible uses is one of the things they have been actually pretty clear on. We cannot directly or indirectly offset reduction in net tax revenue. We can't fund a pension fund. We can't fund debt service. We can't fund legal settlements and judgments. We can't make a deposit to the rainy day or financial reserves, which is our fund balance. And federal match requirements isn't as clear, but for the most part, it's you're not allowed to use this for your federal match of a grant. The additional town grants that that we've gone for is the staffing for adequate fire and emergency response, which is often referred to as SAFER. We have recently applied for another one, but previously we applied for it and we received funding for 4 firefighters. For 2 of the years, it was 75%, and for the third year, I believe it was either 35 or 40. I don't know that off the top of my head. We've applied for the EMS Warm Zone grant and received it we've received it twice within the last 2 years. This is essentially, the Warm Zone is what they consider an active shooting. It gives them the ability to purchase equipment to bring people out of what they call the warm zone or hot area and perform the emergency services they need to. The Emergency Management Performance Grant, we've also received twice in the last 2 years. It's helped assist with outfitting our fire department's why can't I think of the name of it? Critical Response Center. That's not the name of it, but it's essentially the main response center for emergencies for the fire department. The next one is the Assistance to Firefighter Grants. This is where we received a good amount for buying our SCBAs, which are very expensive. This grant was about $211,000 for those SCBA's. The next one is a Bulletproof Vest grant, which pretty self-explanatory. Homeland Security grant is one of the ones we received for the work at the airport and assists us in purchasing things to ensure we're capable of doing that. Traffic Enforcement grant is a grant to assist with traffic enforcement. The Arts Council had applied for the New Hampshire State Council for the Arts Grant. They received this in order to assist in bettering their Concerts on the Commons annual shows. The Pre-Disaster Mitigation Grant was applied for by the Fire Department and Planning Department, and this is essentially, it's intended to allow us to plan for pre-disasters in certain areas. The Transportation Alternatives Program Grant, which is commonly referred to as TAP. This is the rail trail grant that was voted on a couple of years ago by the public. The First Responders Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act grant is, again, it helps the firefighters deal with the addiction of the opioid crisis, which is still ongoing despite COVID being active. In fiscal year 2020, the town received about 1.1 million in federal awards. In 21, we're expected to receive over 750, and the reason I am mentioning that total is at 750, we qualify for a single audit from the, not from the federal government, our auditors perform it to ensure that we are using the federal funds in compliance with what they were intended for. That's also calculating before the American Rescue Plan Act, any money was received, and before FEMA public assisting funding is received. Applying for grants, the departments will apply for grants. I'm sure if you've watched the council meetings, you've seen Darren come up here, and the fire department has worked very hard to apply for a lot of grants. We've outsourced with it's Littleberry Press for a grant, and we use them a lot for referencing other grants and what we think we could do. And I just covered the single audit aspect. Any questions on any of them?
Jared,
Mrs. Siegman.
is that single audit going to cost us?
So yes, in this current year, we had it and we were able to actually get it reimbursed from Gopher. Next year, it will also cost us, it's going to be about 10,000.
Okay, that's what I was curious.
It's between 75 and 10,000, depending on the guidance that is provided by the federal government regarding the grants. The guidance for Gopher wasn't provided to them until December, which is funny because they have 6 months after the end of the fiscal year to perform the audit in compliance. So they had to extend that threshold.
It's going to be interesting to see how much extra work auditors have. Don't forget, this year ends, well, you know, this fiscal year ends obviously in a couple of months. It'd be interesting to see how much additional hours, if any, that the auditors spend, because we're all getting much more, you know, federal grants than the past. And we usually get the IDA and a couple, this year, the IDA, the SO1, you know, all those. So it'll be interesting to see just how much longer they stay at the town hall, the SAU office.
So it's funny, we had our preliminary the first week of March of last year in 2020, and they said, is there any chance of a single audit? I looked at the numbers, no, absolutely not. No way. 2 weeks later, I called them up, we are definitely having a single audit.
And the school district already has a single audit. We get more than that 750 threshold, so we're always under that single audit.
Thank you.
Other question? Are we allowed to use any of their funding to offset their audit costs for taking their funding, or do we have to fund that? In other words, that's not an acceptable expenditure for taking their money.
So for the Gopher, we were able to. ARPA hasn't determined any of that yet, but typically it's not.
Okay. So we just need to make sure when we hit those thresholds that we budget enough money or use the undesignated fund for something like that.
Well, getting into the budget next, we'd have to make sure we budget enough money because we are not able to
Use that.
expend more than what we have budgeted, even if we have it in fund balance.
Right. That's true.
Yep.
All right, budget.
All right, I'm not being funny, it's 9 o'clock, so you gauge how fast you want us to go, or, whatever.
Brevity is appreciated.
I get it. Oh, God. Okay, so two things that came up at your last meeting, line item budget, line item versus bottom line budget. Okay, so let's cut to the chaser here a little bit. RSA,
32.8, I believe.
32.
yeah, 32.8, I think 32.10. Make it fairly clear that during the budget process, during the budget development, the voters are approving what we would call a bottom line budget, an appropriation. Okay? So 32.8, very quickly. No Board of Selectmen, School Board of Village, or Commissioners of any other employee, agency, municipality acting shall pay or agree to pay any money or incur any liability involving the expenditure of any money for any purpose in excess of the amount appropriated by the legislative body for that purpose. The purpose is, at that level, school, municipal services. So we have an $81 million budget, the town has,
34.
okay? They cannot overexpend that amount, okay? That's the purpose, school, municipalities. Below that, we got instruction, executive administration, they have police, fire, highway, so forth and so on. 32.10. If changes arise during the year following the annual meeting that make it necessary to expend money more than the amount appropriated for a specific purpose, instruction, administration, public safety, that's the purpose. The governing body may transfer that appropriation and an expended balance remaining the same or other appropriate provided that it does not go above the total number. So it recognizes that the appropriation is one number, 81 million and whatever, and that the governing body and the administration have the duty, the responsibility to use that money, to expend that money for the purpose it was designated in the best interest of the town or the school. That's what the law says. Okay, that's the legal issue. That's the legal definition of what we're talking about. Go back to like 32, the Municipal Budget Act, okay, where it talks about an appropriation and a purpose. And it has those definitions that we went over back in September. Those are important. That's what we talk about in the NHMA meeting. The purpose is the school or town. The appropriation is to the amount that's been approved at the annual meeting for the purpose, town or school. And from then on, it's up to the council, school board administrations to be financially responsible in a prudent manner. Use those expended money for the purpose it was voted for. Now, there are lines, of course, that run up the budget to the number. And so we look at the practicality of a line item budget, and you gotta understand what a line item budget means. A line item budget means, in pure definition, if the police department has a zero for equipment, okay? They can't buy any equipment. They might, but if they do, they gotta charge it to supplies, or travel, or some area. They cannot put a number in equipment, okay? It's illegal if you go on a line item budget, if you're adopting, however way, a line item budget. Examples I would give, I'll do town first and school. How is Justin, on a line item budget, gonna handle snow overtime from the time of one council meeting to another, and he has two storms? Stop the plows, I'm gonna go over in snow overtime. Really? Or fire overtime, or for us, okay? If we're gonna go over in substitutes, time out. Can't put Justin in front of that math class. I don't have any money for substitutes. I gotta go to the school board and ask them if I can find money and move money in substitutes so I can have Miss McKenney teach the 3rd grade and Matthew Thornton next week. Really? It doesn't work. Go back to the purpose of a budget. It is a planned document that tells you how you expect to run your organization for the year. And the law even tells you there will be changes. There will be transfers. And those transfers are allowed, so long as you don't overrun the bottom line. As I mentioned earlier, 3 or 4 years ago, no way in God's green earth would Chuck Zapple ever think in his wildest dreams he was going to spend $120,000 to move snow off the roofs. But we did. You want to wait? Did you want to wait 2 weeks to go to a school board meeting to ask the school board if I can go do bids to remove snow? If we had did that, one or two things would have happened. There would have been nobody doing it because we were the first ones and everybody followed us. And 2, you might have had a roof go before you went to the school board and asked them. That's why it's a bottom line budget to be managed by the council, school board, school district in town in the best interest of the town or school district, not to exceed the bottom line. That's why it's a bottom line budget. Open positions. We mentioned it earlier. I'll tell you on the school side, when we get to our budget, aside from some assistance, and except for COVID, we have no open positions. I mean, we have teachers, they're filled, hopefully, and all the other staff might have a custodian, and you might have some assistants. That's it. It's even unusual to have those open. When we do our budget, all our positions are full. And we take those positions, right? And if they're contracted, like the teachers have steps, we step them up. Or if there's a percentage, like CPI for custodians, we move them up. And we put a certain percentage in for administration, and then we go through the operating budget. Okay? We're all full. We don't know until after the annual meeting how many teachers, who, and how many have decided to retire on June 30. So when they tell us in April, May, and June, there are costs associated with their retirement. They get accrued benefits that are paid out, I say June 30, before June 30. We budget for that money, but we can never budget the right amount. We just take a 3-year average, unless we know, certain people have already told us we're leaving. So what happens is, and you started to go that way, when you have like 10 teachers that leave this year, and you get to July 1, you fill those 10 teachers, usually they're less money than the ones who left. Usually the veteran teachers have been here 20, 30 years. On a higher scale, you hire teachers in step 1, 2, or 3, whatever, a lower amount. That creates what we say savings to staff turnover. That savings to staff turnover is 90% of what we use to cover substitutes, because we never budget substitutes right, except for COVID. We never have money, the right amount for out-of-district tuition, and we never have the right amount for any other stuff, like the snow removal. That savings that's generated July 1, because of the teachers that retired the year before, is what we use to cover all the mistakes in our budgeting, so to speak, that went over. We don't have very many open positions when we start our budget. So when we say open positions, they're usually open for a small period of time. The problem we have is, just so everybody knows, every school district in March, April, and May are looking for teachers. Everyone. The whole New England county is looking for teachers. Just like when we talked about construction, January, February, March, every school district is putting out bids for summer construction. Because you only got 2 months to get it done. You're not going to start ripping down walls and whatever roofs when the kids are in school. So every school district wants construction done June 20th to like August 15th. And every school district, April, May, and June, looking for teachers. The whole group. So when the teachers retire and we flip to the new fiscal year, that savings is used to fund predominantly substitutes, out-of-district tuition, and some other required stuff that comes along. You get a student in July that requires special services. You can't say, geez, we don't have money for that. That's not working. That's not working. That can't work. It's illegal. So that's when open positions, that's what we have. Now, to go back, there is no time limit for open positions. It's when it's what the boards feel that the duties, responsibilities are still required. I mean, police and fire are not going to bring anybody in for police and fire. They're looking for quality individuals, and they should be, and they are. So it takes time, especially now, it takes time, tell me if I'm wrong, to hire the quality of fire and police that they want. So you're going to have open positions carrying over.
And that's where, at the end of the year, the money we return to the taxpayer, which we do every year, that's predominantly where the money comes from, staff turnover.
You covered it pretty well there. For our open positions, we don't have the same situation where everyone retires on June 30th. We deal with retirements all throughout the year, or people leaving all throughout the year. So we budget based on essentially when they leave. We don't know if they are going to leave January, February, March, November. A perfect example is our head of the assessing retired in October, I want to say. We were able to go through, find the salary surveys for the assessing position and budget for that position. Janos, our public works director, retired, I want to say March. We've already voted on the budget at that point. We can't go and change his salary. Next year's budget will include the new position, or not the new position, the new salary for the individual. But for fiscal year 22, it is still his salary. And part of the reason we did the charter amendment was to actually, try and work with dealing with this. And I go back to my example of my predecessor, because that's when the original default budget law came in. The way the default budget law was the voters voted on this last year, so that's the salary. So they voted on, 100,000. Well, I'm here, and it's making, 50,000. It doesn't matter. Default budget is 100,000 at that point. So the amendment allowed us to make that adjustment for known items. Essentially, I like to call it the common sense aspect. If we know that this person's here and we know that this is what they're going to be making, that's the default budget. That's what it should be. It shouldn't be the last year's salary.
And that's what we
do too.
The amendment to the budget did that. When we did our charter, we now go by what we have as of October 1, what are the salaries we have, and then we step them up and down. Now, one thing the town and school has that private industry doesn't have is minimum staffing, especially on that side. Police and fire have minimum staffing. So you may have Justin as a police officer leave, and you may have $20,000 in that professional salary line because he left. But you got minimum staffing that requires overtime. So you're paying Mr. Farrell and Mr. Slater and Mr. Different overtime because you got minimum staffing that has to be required. So just because you got $20,000 in his salary, you're covering a lot over in overtime. Same with us. If we have a teacher that leaves, all right, or out sick, okay, well, we got substitutes. We got to have an adult in front of the building. So you may have a salary, professional salary, savings, 20,000. But you got to look and see, did any of that go to the substitutes that you covered that position? So you've got certain areas where you've got to have a body. Unlike me or Lisa, if he's out for a couple of days, someone will help or whatever, but you don't need a replacement. Fire, police, teacher, a body has to be there. And that's different than most private organizations.
Chair, can I ask a question? You guys don't need to answer this, but this is something, I've heard this before over the last 10 years with the budget committee and stuff. And I figured, you know what? It doesn't make sense to me because we're like a bottom line budget for both you guys. This is what you get to spend and you can adjust. We don't, far as I know, we've never really used line item budgets through both of them. But my question is, I've heard this before, and maybe I misunderstand it. You start with a zero budget, you start with last year's budget. And I was thinking about this, and I was asked a couple people, and I was like going, what is the difference with that? Because I even thought that, like, well, why does the school start with a zero budget and build up their budget every year like the town does? So then I figured, you know what, maybe I misunderstand it. Can you explain to me the difference between somebody saying, you guys start at $0 and build your budget every year? You guys go off of last year's budget and build your budget for what it's gonna be this year.
No, we don't.
What is,
Go ahead.
what is it? How do you guys build your budget? Because it would seem like you'd start from zero, and what
We
do you
do
need?
start
what
at
do you
zero
need?
as well. I mean, we have our staffing level
Right,
as of October, which would include any new hires at a lower rate. Those people all get rolled in.
right.
So it's the same positions that got voted on. Any change to those positions get identified through the budget process, and we either add or deduct. But we start at zero, and then all your department heads start at zero. I mean, I'm not saying they don't reference back to what they budgeted last year.
They'd have
They
to.
look at what they budgeted, they look what they spent, they make some decisions, and then they put in for what they need. So we do start zero as well. Default, obviously rolls the budget from the previous year, and then, make all these adjustments to it.
I didn't
But
know if anybody on the budget committee has heard that before too, that the schools should make their budget like the town makes their budget. So I always figured, I'm gonna ask, what's the difference? What exactly?
I
is
think
the
we're pretty similar.
So,
I mean, same idea. They know that they're gonna need, I'm just making up numbers, tell me, 20 firemen, 30 policemen, and whatever highway. Okay? So that's, you start with that, and you say, can we get away with it, deleting a fireman or policeman or public works? We do the same thing on the school side. What is the enrollment looking like? And we said, we do that +1, -1 on elementary. You can't do it in high, middle school, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna get into it again, but you can do it in elementary, and we look at it. And we've made adjustments. We've made plenty of adjustments over the years on staffing enrollments, from the elementary to the middle to the high school. And then from there, I mean, let's be fair, they look at what they've spent over the last couple of years, supplies and equipment, and then maybe add 2% for inflation, or if they're getting more bodies, what the elementaries will do, they figure out that their supplies are, I can't remember, make up a number, $50 per kid. So they take their enrollment,
based on enrollment.
$50 on the enrollment, that's what their budget is for general supplies at the elementary. But then they look at, are they improving curriculum? Are they getting a new math program? Are we changing the math program? Are we going from paper to digital? So those ideas and factors come into play before the budget is given to them.
But remember, our budget, 80% is staff and benefits.
you're a service organization.
So we roll in those positions from last year, and there's no changes to those positions. It's identified in the budget process if we need to add or if we are able to reduce. That's what we always call, if you've been around, the add swap sheet. So we start with the same, that's our starting point. And then from there, if we add or deduct, it's identified in the process and discussed with the school board and with the community until we come up to that final number in January.
That's why, for us, the first night is personnel. Once you get through, same thing with the town. Once you get through police, fire, and highway, the town, you're rolling. Once you get through personnel with us, I mean, let's be honest, we know the operating costs of the high, middle, and the elementary is nothing, right? All the money is in personnel with the rolled up benefits, get you about 80% of the budget. That's why we do personnel first, because once you get through personnel, the other stuff, maybe B&G, because, there's some complex stuff in B&G. But once you get through the personnel, you're done with 80% of the budget.
All right, we have 10 slides left. Let's continue to push.
I think you went through a lot of them.
I went through a lot of them.
Okay.
Are we clear now on open positions? All right. Your spreadsheet?
So, yeah, the only thing I wanted to say is we discussed at the budget meetings the last 10 years, and I mean, the spreadsheet doesn't have 10 years because from 10 to 14, there were no open positions, and I didn't want to make it smaller than it needed to be. but we discussed the funding and how they were brought on, whether by warrant article or council resolution or reorganization of departments.
I just want to say real quick, this presentation will be in the minutes.
Yeah, so I should just put all that right in the minutes.
Thank you. All right,
Done that. Okay, these are just, very quickly, these are definitions we went over, and I, seriously, just look at 3210, 32.8, look at the, Municipal Budget Act, Municipal Finance Act, there's two of them. Okay, we done that? See, I told you, we did a lot of this. Did that. Well, okay, so I'll get to my third quarter report. I think I can do this in 10 minutes later. I can do it in 5.
Do I hear 5?
Revenues are gonna come pretty much flat for us, okay? Where Medicare is gonna be the one that's probably gonna put us at even, or maybe a buck under our target for revenues. Won't be a whole lot. The expenditure side is gonna come about $1.2 million under budget. That's substitutes, big part of it, out-of-district tuition, big part of it, okay? And the savings from turnover, last year, I think we had 22 retirements. So then, those 22 their retirements got paid last year, their savings incurred this year, I think it's about $900,000 on the professional salary line, and along with the savings and substitutes because there were none around.
We also had a large savings. This year was an unusual year because of COVID, and we had a lot of unfilled positions in our special ed department in the assistants.
About
That's very unusual.
$700,000.
That's never happened before, but at one time we had, like 30 unfilled positions. So
Right.
there's a lot of savings in that
That's about
salary line as well.
$700,000 on that. And then you got temporary positions. Remember, we didn't run a lot of programs this year. One example, we didn't send the 8th grade to DC this year. That's a lot of money for chaperones, and that's all classified as temporary salaries. For those chaperones, for those programs that normally would have occurred, or field trips or whatever, that normally would have occurred, didn't get expensed. So those are the big areas of savings, okay? Two big negatives are, as I said, when you have 22 retirees, you got 22 plus 2 administrators this year, okay? 3 administrators this year. Those retirement costs are in this year's budget. We don't project, and we're never going to project, that we're going to expend as much money as we are this year for retirement costs, accrued sick time, accrued vacation time, et cetera. 22 people, this year it's 30, you can expect a fair amount of money coming over next year. Actually, take that back. The amount we're spending this year is for the 30 people that put in this year, plus the administrators. So that's a lot of money that needs to be covered that wasn't budgeted. And the other one is we're gonna have to cover dining services to the tune of about $200,000. God bless her. She has more energy than Eveready Bunny, but when the high school's in half the time, the vending machines weren't operational, and that's where she makes her big money. And third of the population stayed at home. There just wasn't the bodies to generate the meal count, to generate the revenue to help pay the cost. But I think in the end, we're still gonna have over $1 million in fund balance that will go to the bottom line to be used either for retention or give back to the taxpayers for the December tax bill. That's our third quarter in less than 5 minutes. I believe I gave you my third quarter report, right?
Yes.
So if Jen, for example, she's if you got any questions, like, just call us. I know we're going quick, so just call us and say, what did you mean by this or that or whatever?
Next slide.
Well, we're just going for the town. We've kind of gotten past the slides a little bit.
Yeah, so this is essentially just going through the budget process, which we, I believe, just covered anyways. Now the quarter part. So we're anticipating to come in, I like to go conservatively because I prefer giving good news than bad news. I would say about over 400,000 in revenues. The major factors on this for non-property tax revenues, the major factors on this is motor vehicle revenues, as well as various grants that the town has received that were from prior year expenses. Gopher was a big factor in that aspect. Expenses are projected to come under budget. Conservatively, again, I would say around 500,000. The main reason why is the town has sought reimbursement for a lot of the expenses through the COVID grants. And retirements have left positions open that we haven't had the ability to fill or have been looking to fill and haven't at this time. We had a budget freeze in place for the first portion of the year, and we're now being extra cautious with expenses at this time. So the freeze is not fully in place, but we're still being extremely cautious with what's available in the budget and how it's going. I think I beat you time-wise there.
I have a quick question, may I?
Yeah.
Motor vehicle registrations are up. How are we doing with rental car registrations?
I can get that to you in more detail at a later date, but I can tell you that Enterprise has roughly been about the same, and Hertz bankruptcy is impacting that aspect. It's that one is much lower.
Yep.
Enterprise, I want to say, is roughly about the same, if not higher.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
All right. Anything else?
Just a quick question. Hey, Peter, just on the Hooksett students, I don't want to get into this anymore, but is anything changes? Are we making any changes at all from this whole discussion we just had for an hour about this? Are we looking at the charging more? What's the plan? Do you think there's a takeaway?
Well, I think the plan will be.
Is there a takeaway from all this?
The plan from this year, I think, will be, since we're so close to negotiating a new contract, MOU, sorry, we will probably stay with what Hooksett agrees to pay. And if I had to guess, they're gonna up it $250. I think that's been like the bump each year, is $250. So they'll be at $12,250.
They
And-
are at 12,250
I mean,
next year.
Right,
12,500.
12,500. And then, don't forget, it ends at 23, so in order to give them the 22, 23, I think it's this summer or from now to like January is when the contract needs to be brought up, because they need time to put in their budget for the 22, 23 year, what the contract will be and everything. So my guess is they're gonna up at 250, and we're gonna stay around the 40 per class. And go from there. I don't see enrollment at the high school spiking, so I don't think there's gonna be any reason that we're not gonna have any excess seats.
Is there any reporting you can provide us and say, we looked at the enrollment and the numbers, and that any changes here would not affect teachers?
That would be one of your questions, I would say, to bring up during budget time.
All right. Thanks.
Anyone else?
Good morning.
All right.
I never knew I had such power.
Thank you,
We good?
thank you for coming in.
To all of you, yeah.
Absolutely. All right, moving on. It's liaison reports. We'll start with DPW.
So I have nothing to report for DPW for this month.
Thank you. Police Department?
Yeah, I spoke with Chief Hart. He said, looking at a surplus of over $700,000. So I'm assuming that sort of factored into what Justin was mentioning.
Like I said, I like to go conservative and that is accurate. I am close
Okay.
to 600 with him, but
Okay,
I like to go conservative. Like
All
I
right,
said, I'd
that
rather
sounds
give
good.
good news
All right, I
at
like
year
that.
end than say, oh, by the way, that 500,000 is actually 300, because people will get very annoyed at that.
yeah, All right. And then the body cameras, he said, still under review.
Okay. Where, did he give kind of a gauge on where they're at with that?
He said he's got like a group of police officers that is sort of like a task force that are looking into this
Okay.
and doing some analysis work on it.
Awesome. Thank you. Good job. Fire department.
Fire Department, I exchanged emails with Chief O'Brien this week. His operating budget remains about 2% over where it should be, primarily due to overtime and equipment costs throughout the pandemic. Vehicle maintenance is also running over due to some costly repairs, and he's looking to see if maybe he can find, he's going to explore vendors just to make sure we're getting the best deal on maintenance. Provided a lot of information about grants, which I won't go over because Justin did a nice job of covering all that, but I applaud the fire department for all the grants they seek and then receive. They hope to have some firefighter vacancies filled by June 14th, part of the grants. And the fire department received a military vehicle from the state. It's a 2002 Stevenson 5-ton, 6-wheel drive vehicle. It's a forestry vehicle to replace a 1984 vehicle that we're currently using. So that was a good get for the fire department. So that's it.
I drove.
Sure, can I ask him a question?
Go ahead.
Are they gonna paint it red or are they gonna leave it camouflage green?
I drove one of those in the Marines. They're a lot of fun.
Oh, wow.
Remember how
From
I
a
said
budget
conservative?
perspective,
That costs money.
Never mind. He's not
All
allowed
right.
to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Kip. CIP?
Yeah, they're going through the planning process right now, getting a meeting scheduled.
Okay, thank you. Town manager, finance department, that would be me. I do not have anything other than what was briefed tonight. Additional, council? Do you have anything?
No, it's pretty much anything they were talking money-wise and stuff we've covered tonight.
Agreed.
Same with schools.
Same thing with schools, finance, superintendent, school board. Anything you want to add to that?
I don't know.
They already talked about, they approved the substitute pay
Yeah,
at the last board meeting.
yeah. They went to from 65 to like 80. And, because it was one of those things where, yes, there's other schools going up. I got an email from Bob, thank you, and stuff like that. The idea is not to like, there's other schools offering, let's say, $120 a day. We're at $80, went from 65 to $80 a day. The problem is, you don't want to jump too high. If that doesn't work out, we can always up it, not us, but school board can always up it again. The idea is not to overreact based on what some of the other schools are doing, and just see where we end up in there. So
Have it at a
they're
rate.
taking a conservative approach to increasing that.
I think what they said is have a rate that they can maintain.
Yes.
All right. And a liaison report. So next month, I will reach out to the town manager and invite. So next month's meeting is the June 24th. As mentioned last month, I'd like the town manager and the superintendent to come in. We had a great brief from the finance directors. I'd love to hear from the leaders or the heads of the forms of government. And so I will invite Mr. Smith, and you want to reach out to Mr. Liberty and invite him in. And it'll be the same thing as last year.
Okay.
And they both were here, so they'll know. Just a opportunity where we heard, like I said, we heard the. I think. Can you push out the email that you sent that we sent last year? Do you mind providing that to?
I do not mind.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
And if I may, I think one of the objectives of this, we just heard basically a report on budgets, almost looking back, where are we? When we talk to Kevin and Scott, it's more looking forward to the upcoming budget season, and do we have expectations, and what are their expectations? So
Okay.
I have an email that I used last year that I'll forward to you and also to you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right. So as mentioned, do we have any public comment? No? Seeing none? All right, as mentioned, our next meeting is June 24th. July, we typically skip July due to school tours. Same thing in August, we go through the tours. September, we'll review the community services grant. October, we're gonna finalize everything. I'll get in more detail on that, and then November, December's budget workshop. So next meeting, June 24th, 7 PM here. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second?
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All oppose, nay. Or I don't vote nay. Let me correct that. I vote aye. We're adjourned.